He wears white, but commands like a king. He speaks of peace, but has witnessed wars waged in his name. He is called the Vicar of Christ, God's representative on earth. But beneath the mitre and the robes lies something far more complex. A man wrapped in centuries of power, mystery, and myth. For over 2,000 years, the Pope has stood as the spiritual leader of more than 1 billion souls. To some, he is a beacon of hope, the shepherd of the faithful. To others, he is the most powerful religious figure in history, shaping empires, silencing dissent, and bending nations to the will of the Church. But the story of the papacy is not just one of holiness and humility. It is a story written in blood and ambition. A story where divine right clashes with earthly desire, where saints and sinners wear the same ring of power, and where truth is often buried beneath centuries of tradition and silence. From the ashes of Rome rose a throne unlike any other, one that claimed supremacy not only over men, but over kings. A throne draped in sacred authority, yet stalked by scandal. From crowning emperors to launching crusades, from silencing reformers to navigating cold wars, the papacy has been at the center of global transformation, conspiracy, and controversy. This is not merely the story of a religious office. This is the story of the throne, eternal, unshaken, and feared. A throne built on faith, and protected by power. It began amid the dying embers of a fallen empire. Rome, the eternal city, the heart of the ancient world, was unraveling. Its legions, once invincible, had grown weary. Its borders, once secure, were crumbling. And in the chaos of decline, something unexpected began to stir. From the blood-soaked arenas and the shadows of the catacombs emerged a force the emperors had once tried to crush. Christianity had been a marginal faith, mocked by philosophers, outlawed by emperors, and brutally repressed by the Roman state. Its followers were pacifists, healers, and martyrs, meeting in secret, worshipping in whispers, and often dying for their beliefs. For centuries they had no temples, no political power, and no voice. And yet, their message endured. While Rome conquered with steel, Christians converted with faith, and with every execution, their numbers grew. Then, in the year 313 AD, the world shifted. A single imperial decree changed the course of history. Emperor Constantine, having secured his grip on power after a brutal civil war, issued the Edict of Milan. With this proclamation, Christianity was no longer a crime. It was a protected faith. The hunted became the tolerated. The persecuted became partners in power. For the first time, the cross stood beside the eagle of Rome. No longer confined to the margins, the Church stepped into the light of empire. Bishops gained influence. Churches were built in stone and marble, and at the center of it all stood the Bishop of Rome, once a local spiritual leader, now destined to become something far greater. This moment was more than a political pivot. It was the birth of a new world order, one where the spiritual and the imperial would become inseparably linked, one where religion would not just comfort the dying empire, it would outlive it. And in the ruins of Roman glory, a new throne was rising, one not of Caesar, but of the Pope. Amid collapsing order, the Bishop of Rome became more than a shepherd. As generals fell and emperors faded, the Pope emerged as Rome's spiritual anchor. When there was no more Caesar, the Pope filled the void. In a world bereft of leadership, the voice from the altar grew louder. When emperors fell, popes stood tall. Through centuries, that voice transformed. No longer merely a preacher, the Pope became a king in priestly robes. Power and faith became inseparable. In the year 800, in the hushed grandeur of St. Peter's, history pivoted. Pope Leo III placed a shimmering crown on Charlemagne's head and proclaimed him Emperor of the Romans. Here, the papacy claimed a role above any mortal ruler, a kingmaker, a judge, the very shadow of God's authority on earth. The institution grew richer, vaster. The papal state spread like a patchwork across Italy, bristling with armies and castles. Papal courts ruled over taxes and justice, while Vatican gold glittered. The Pope now wielded the power to excommunicate even kings, casting them into political and spiritual exile. When King Henry IV of Germany dared to defy Rome, he found himself stripped of dignity, forced to trek barefoot through snow, to beg the Pope's mercy at Canossa. The world saw a king on his knees and a Pope, unyielding. No one defied the Pope without consequences. His word could trigger revolts, topple monarchies, or hurl Europe into crusades. Yet beneath the sacred veil, a darker game unfolded. As Christianity became Europe's strongest power, the papacy became a prize worth scheming for. The Medici, the Borgias, mighty banking dynasties. They bought and bribed their way to the throne of St. Peter. Titles, indulgences, even cardinal appointments were traded like currency. Rodrigo Borgia, who became Pope Alexander VI, is named rarely with affection, and often with dread. Whispers swirled of bribery, of mistresses and midnight assassins, of parties far from holy. Alexander VI was the master of nepotism, carving out realms for his children, and for himself a legacy of scandal. The Vatican became not just a house of worship, but a high-stake chessboard, balancing the ambitions of France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire. Betrayal, poison, and backroom deals played as large a role as prayer and penance. The Pope no longer simply represented God. In the eyes of the world, he was Caesar in a cassock, commanding armies, forging alliances, pursuing power by any means. At the core of Rome, behind gilded gates and marble corridors, secrets deepened. The Vatican became a fortress of conspiracy, where ancient archives held forbidden books and dangerous knowledge. The Inquisition hunted heretics, driving truth underground. Some pontiffs died suddenly, sparking rumors of poisoned chalices or midnight assassins hiding, not in the shadows, but in the very heart of the Church. The Papal States were not immune to the lure of wealth. Vast sums flowed through Rome's coffers, leading to secretive dealings with powerful families and mysterious banks. And sometimes, secrets threatened to explode. In 1978, Pope John Paul I died just 33 days after taking office. The official story: a heart attack. But rumors blossomed like nightshade. Whispers that he had uncovered corruption in the Vatican Bank, that his death was not an act of God, but of earthly hands eager to protect their power. Was it divine will or Vatican justice? Yet all things built upon secrecy and corruption invite reckoning. When truth is silenced, revolution speaks. In 1517, an obscure German monk named Martin Luther rebelled against the hypocrisy at Rome's heart. He nailed 95 revolutionary thoughts to a church door, denouncing the sale of indulgences and the papal claim to sell grace like a market commodity. The Reformation tore through Europe like wildfire, shattering the Pope's monopoly on authority. The continent drowned in wars of religion. Millions perished. Christendom fractured. Where once the Pope's voice shook kingdoms, now it was just one voice among many. Time marched on. The Papal States faded. New nations rose from the ashes of religious conflict. Even so, the marble halls of the Vatican still echoed with intrigue. In 2013, Pope Benedict XVI, beset by scandal and shadows, became the first pontiff in 6 centuries to abdicate. Scandals emerged: sex abuse cover-ups, financial fraud, clandestine political dealings. Pope Francis arrived promising renewal, a humble figure among ancient thrones. Yet critics insist the deepest games are unchanged, that beneath reforms, old power structures remain intact and unyielding. The throne stands, but the crown, once invincible, is now forever cracked. Ultimately, the story of the Pope is not only a chronicle of faith, it is a saga of ambition, control, and the eternal struggle between power and conscience, spirit and flesh. Here, every prayer is shadowed by the possibility of treachery, every act of piety by the temptation to rule. When a man claims to speak for God, who dares to question him? The answer, written across the centuries, is resounding. Those who do often pay in blood. And yet, humanity persists, seeking, questioning, resisting, searching always for the line between sacred and profane. Remember, faith can inspire, but power always tempts. This is the legacy and the warning of the papal throne.